Melby, and June, at the age of 10, moved to Waupaca, but just for the summer. And when we think about coming to Waupaca for the summer, it's all about fun. But if you read June's book, she has a little different take on that, moving to Waupaca during the summer. Her parents owned the Tom Thumb golf course, and her stories in her book are wonderful stories, and I have to say it's one of the best memoirs I've read in the last couple of years. So really consider reading her book, and of course we get the opportunity to listen to her and talk to her today. So please join me in welcoming June Melby.
Well, hello. I'm here during the chips part of the meal, which is it's a first for me. That's very exciting. It's a choice of chips. If you're about to be the speaker, don't eat the chips because then they do tickle the throat. I just learned that. The Fritos are delicious, but they do tickle a little bit. Anyway, I'm very flattered and honored to be here, the first author at the book festival. And it's a little daunting in a way because I wrote about this town, and here you are. And I can't make up anything because you'll know. I've been on a book tour during the year, and I could say just about anything. People will believe me. But now, well, there's no secrets from you. So, I just want to check the sound. Can you hear me okay? I noticed that if I wander a little bit to the side, the sound goes off pretty fast, right? So that's not good. So I'm going to creep up to this microphone like it's a good friend. All right? Okay, but we're good sound-wise? And I'll try not to talk too fast, but sometimes I get excited. So let me know if I'm talking too fast. We have someone monitor in the back who can wave their hand and say, June, we need to catch up with you. And I really want to, first of all, before I forget, thank Peg Burrington of the Waupaca Public Library. First of all, this is an awesome library. I love this library. When I'm here visiting family, I love coming by this library and frequently check out way more things than I'll have time to look at while I'm here. And I also want to thank Nancy Root-Miller, who's organizing this freaking awesome festival, and Ann Berger-Linden, the treasurer, who are working hard. Thank you very much for all you're doing. So I often ask when I've been out on tour, especially in Wisconsin, how many people have actually been to Waupaca? And then I see a handful of hands. So how many people have been to Waupaca? No. How many people have been to Tom Thumb? Wow, that's okay. How many people have already read the book? Oh, no. So there's really no secrets from you folks. How many people have read the book and have serious questions? Well, Stanley, my mom raised her hand. That's awesome. It's about her. She's got questions. I'll tell you how this came to be. It is true that, as Peg was saying, when I was 10 years old, my family was up visiting the area. My grandparents lived in Iowa. So every summer we came up to visit, and every summer we played a game of Tom Thumb mini golf. And one summer, when I was 10, it was for sale. Oh, that's interesting. Nothing happened. The next summer we came up to visit my grandparents and spent some time in Iowa and at Camp Cleghorn. The mini golf course was still for sale. And my dad went, My parents were school teachers. We lived in Decorah, Iowa, which is 4 hours from here. I know it's 4 hours because we drove that route a number of times over the years. And as you know, probably, school teachers are really well respected. In Iowa, so well admired in the town, but they're not exactly well paid. So in the summertime, my dad, like many other school teachers, had to pick up jobs for the 3 months. And here are some of the jobs he had. He sold encyclopedias door to door, and I think he sold one. I think we had the one in my bedroom growing up. One summer he was working as a carpenter's assistant and was asked to do the roofing on the top of a house. The first day he was asked to climb to the top of the roof in the hot sun and see if he could stand it. So he roofed all summer, 3 months, and at the end of the summer he had saved up enough money to get the car fixed. That's it. So it wasn't an easy life. So the second summer we're visiting Waupaca, the Tom Thumb is for sale, and my dad thought, this might be better than roofing in the hot sun. Just by a teeny bit, maybe. So we bought Tom Thumb, which wasn't easy. And I'll tell you how it went. The last day of school in Iowa was one of the last days in May. School would get out at noon, usually. We'd pack up the car, lock up the house once we found the house key, which we used once each year. That was one of the more difficult parts of this transit, was finding that key. We'd pack up the car, drive 4 hours, get here sometime late Friday evening, Saturday morning, get up early, open up Tom Thumb. It was frequently the Saturday of Memorial Weekend, which is a busy day, as you know, for the out-of-towners to come in. And then we would work at the mini golf course 7 days a week, 3 months. And then the night before school started in the fall, we would shoot the people off the course. You got to get done. You got to finish. You got to finish. Close up. Drive the 4 hours back to Iowa and get there sometimes 10, 11 in the evening. And the next day was the first day of school. And that was what we did. And we never took a summer vacation after that. So, of course, as a kid, I loved it. Because nothing a kid likes better than working 7 days a week all summer. I never got to go to camp. Okay, I went to camp once, but it wasn't a very good one, so I don't count it. So as a kid, I was kind of grumpy about the whole arrangement. We lived out there on a cottage, just, you're familiar with it, I'm sure, you know. After I graduated from college, I moved to California to pursue fame and fortune. I wanted to become a rich and famous rock musician. I really did. And then early on, I realized I actually kind of like being on stage by myself. So I'm going to do comedy instead and do music with comedy. So I was a stand-up comedian for 10 years. And I was pursuing fame and fortune while my parents were slaving away at Tom Thumb. How silly they are, making no money, not paying themselves even a salary. Ridiculous. Well, 30 years after Tom Thumb, my parents were ready to retire again. They had retired from teaching and moved up here year-round during that time. I was still in California. Here's the confessional part. In the summer of 2003, I turned 40. My acting career had kind of hit the terrible low spot. I was broke. I couldn't afford my rent. My agent had fired me because there was an actor's strike, and that was the excuse they used, because I actually wasn't bringing in any money for them. And I basically had nothing. Meanwhile, my parents had sold Tom Thumb, and I freaked out. I really couldn't wait to get away from the place, and then suddenly I realized, oh no, you can't get rid of Tom Thumb. I love that place. That's a dumb idea. And I'd always thought I'd become a rich and successful something, comedian or musician, and then be able to come back to Waupaca and buy the place out so my parents could retire in luxury and I would be the big hero. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So I came back here to spend as many days as possible that last summer to just soak it all in. And that's when I realized if I can't buy it, I'm going to have to write a book. And that's why I wrote this book. Because I couldn't afford to hang on to it with money, I'll hang on to it with this. So that's why this happened. I'll read you a couple sections from it, don't you know? But many of you have already read it, so it's really funny to me. I feel like I'm teaching the teachers. So, which is not really a good and accurate metaphor, but you know what I mean. I can't make up stuff. I'll start off by reading a short bit about our family. There were 5 of us. I was the middle child. Any other middle children here? Yes, isn't that awesome? You get to write your own books, too. I highly recommend it. I'm also, it's really fun. My mom is actually here. So now I'm going to read to you about my mom while she's here, which I've never done before at another book event. So that's going to be fun for someone. Let me tell you about us. Mom was tall and practical. If she were an object, she would be a pencil. Not fancy, but handy and streamlined in design. She could do just about everything. Dad was thin and agitated. He was like a rabbit, only he had several hundred students instead of that many baby bunnies. He taught high school chemistry and physics, but he was unlike a rabbit because he didn't like vegetables all that much, didn't frolic, but instead frowned and threw his hands in the air. My older sister, Leanne, was like an officer in the army. She was good at giving orders, and she tended to keep herself from us, me and my younger sister, like we were enlisted men. She was also like an American Indian. When she went to college in South Dakota, people asked her if she was. She's not. She's Norwegian like us, but just happened to be dark and strong like Dad. My younger sister, Carla, was like a teapot. She was pale and pretty and a bit fragile, but really nice to have around, especially on cold days, because she smiled and laughed at my jokes. Me, I was in the middle. I never learned how to do a cartwheel. I had a difficult time throwing the ball back when it was tossed to me, but I was good at trying hard, and that's about all there is to it. Medium height, medium colored, I was like a brown dog, easy to miss. But strangely sarcastic when I got the chance to be heard, like the dog in a movie about a dog who on occasion gets the magical ability to speak. That was it. The five of us, and later came a collie, and later still a cat who wandered in one day with a broken jaw. And then there was Tom Thumb. There were 18 holes. Each had an obstacle between the tee-off and green. We learned that the correct term for the obstacle was hazard, as in item of danger, as in risky. For us, the risk was that the hazard would fall apart. The paddle wheel boat at number 17 had been turning for 15 years already, and once a month dropped a wet piece of rotted wood on the fairway. Hole number 14 was sinking into the lake. The swinging pole on number 6, an 8-foot beam nearly the width of a telephone pole, was coming loose from the only bolt that held it aloft and threatened to clabber one of the tourists who pushed against it each week. But you guys have been there. So you have pushed against it. Now you're going to hear about the danger. You didn't know. Isn't that great to find that out? It seems innocent. I wrote the book in 18 chapters, one for each hole, because I thought that'd be kind of fun. And one of the things you learn when you're writing a book is that you need to entertain yourself. You need to have fun. You're not going to become a millionaire writing, probably not. So enjoy yourself along the way. It also turned out to be a very difficult way to structure a book, but I found that out along the way, because you can't add a chapter 6b if you have another story that would fit in to that chronology. So that's a little tricky. So the next book won't have 18 chapters, probably not. What I decided to do was, because I thought it'd be fun, and it was, to have the theme of each chapter be based on the hazard at that hole. So number 1, which is supposed to be an easy hole, it's not as easy as it looks. So that one is about expectations. And hole number 2, which is a castle, most of the time, is told in the form of a fairy tale. And it's about timing, because that one has a motor, you know. And at one point, my editor said, you know, I really think you need to switch chapters 13 and 16. So why don't we move 15. Move the Ferris wheel up and then put that other one down, and no one will ever know. She really did. She was like, it would make more sense. And I was like, I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I think too many people have been to this place, and I don't think it'll make a hoot of difference. If I move them, I can't do it. So that was one of the things I don't. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for nodding your head. I know, it just would be weird to have people who know the place to read it and go, what? And then you'd probably doubt other things that I'm stating as truth. Right? Yeah. The thing about nonfiction, it's got to be nonfiction, which is tricky sometimes because there's things you would rather keep private or things that would fit better in a chapter 6B, but you can't have a chapter 6B. All right. I'm going to read this section about getting started. I really didn't realize that I would have to work. You know, when you're 10, you don't look that far ahead. I was just thinking it was going to be all fun and games. Oh my gosh, we get to live at the place where we play. This is going to be fantastic. Why would you not think that, right? Well, you know. During that first, and I like this because it references this area, which is kind of fun. It was really fun to describe. I love this area. Is it not gorgeous? Are you aware of this? I mean, try to keep it a secret, but, it's really gorgeous. During that first week, it was about the first week of summer, the Channel Lakes had 2 days of cool rain, followed by a day so clear that the sunlight reflected off the lake blinded you like a camera flashbulb. It's like a day like today, isn't it? Canadian geese flew north over our heads in squadrons of 12 to 20, honking loudly to get our attention. For what purpose, I was never sure. It was our first rain-free morning, and my sisters and I were gathered around the 18th hole. Mom stood nearby, gripping a paper bag. "Let's just wait for Dad," she said, looking towards the garage. "What's going on?" Leanne asked. "We have some things we want to talk over with you girls," Mom said. I took this as a bad sign. My parents did speak to us on occasion, but they relied, like generations of parents before them, on their children's ability to read the creases in their faces for clues as to what they were trying to communicate, the way ancient mariners lacking compass or map stared up at the stars in hopes of guidance. They're going to talk to us about work. All winter long I had waited for this summer. While the snow piled up outside of the windows of our house in Iowa, I thought about mini golf. Play for free, play for free. From September through May, cotton candy, cotton candy. We all thought about mini golf that winter and even played mini golf by hitting balls at plastic cups we scattered across the living room using putters we had swiped from the ticket booth last fall. It never occurred to me that summer at Tom Thumb might have a downside. From the shore of Bass Lake came the sound of one rubber band. Thrig. What was that? Bullfrog, my dad said, joining us. Thrig. That's weird. Okay, now, there's one for each of you girls, Mom said, removing 3 spiral notebooks from the bag and handing one to each of us. Leanne got the red one. Carla, who was always lucky, got the blue one. My notebook was the color of a brown paper bag. I stared with shock at the front cover. "Steno?" I said. "Just ignore that," Mom said to me. "We have to do steno?" "No, forget about that. It's for secretaries. Girls, now listen. You can use these to keep track of your work, what jobs you do, what time you start and stop. In this column, you can write in the total hours, and at the bottom, you can add it up. Then we'll pay you." She told us how we would take turns in the ticket booth. My shift would be from noon to 2 each day. Leanne's would be from 2 to 4. "When is Carla's shift?" I asked. "Carla?" Dad said, his forehead wrinkled in a semaphore for angry. Carla was only 7. She wasn't expected to do much, in part because Carla was the youngest, and in part because she was always treated delicately, and in part because she was in fact delicate. Pale-skinned and frightfully thin, she was sick with a cold or flu or something, the doctors didn't always know what, most weeks of the year. She also had a tendency to fall, tumbling off her high chair at regular intervals during the first 5 years of her life. This gave her amazingly exotic black eyes, which turned green against her white skin and made her appear somehow even more delicate. Carla was like a fragile kitten that wandered over from the neighbors one day and then never left. Leanne will get 75 cents an hour, June will get 50 cents an hour, and Carla will get 35 cents, Mom said. "How come Leanne gets more?" I asked. "Because she's older." Leanne nodded at her notebook, and then she sniffed in agreement. Leanne was less a sister than a threat. She had a way of sniffling, 2 short, deliberate intakes that let you know she had leadership abilities. A brigadier general could do the same. An entire battalion would snap to attention, flip their rifles in the air, and vow to re-enlist. Her eyes were brown and focused like Dad's. Her dark hair was long and thick and brushed once each morning, parted in the center and usually brushed back behind her ears. When the weather was humid, it expanded and thickened. Her eyebrows threatened to take over the world. Sweat gathered on her lip. The slightest exertion, like getting ice cream from the kitchen, was enough to make a mustache of pearls. I don't know why we came out so different. I liked reading humor books, while she preferred reading mysteries. I liked wearing ribbons in my hair and sewing clothes for Barbie dolls. She preferred pinning me to the floor with wrestling holds. I'd rather have a brother, was all she said when she let me get off the floor. Her earliest memories, she admitted, were reaching over the walls of my playpen to push me down, and then doing it again. A second bullfrog, lower in pitch, commented from the shore by number 12. Blub, like the plastic burp from a Tupperware lid. The cooler on the Pepsi machine clicked on. A mosquito landed on my thigh, and I slapped it, ending its sad, sad life. I wasn't sure they were serious. For one, I had just finished 5th grade. Saving for college? Well, college seemed farther away than the bottom of the ocean. Second, we weren't the kind of kids who helped very much around the house. In my case, it was due to the fact that my father felt sorry for old televisions. He saw them languishing at garage sales and local repair shops and brought one home as a form of adoption at a rate of about one per month. Lacking storage space, he plopped a black and white TV, sometimes two, in the corner of each of our bedrooms. They worked, more or less, so I watched a lot of television. Out of duty, I could reason, to the poor abandoned set. We were the kind of kids who were pretty well convinced that Mom and Dad would take care of all the household chores, because generally that's what they did, except for one dreadful winter evening. I'm fed up with doing all the work around this house, Mom said one evening, startling all of us. The next day, a chart appeared taped to the fridge that listed jobs nobody liked, like emptying trash and cooking dinner on weekends. At first, we folded some laundry and took turns washing dishes, but that was that. The chart was ignored, and then one day it disappeared for good. I spent the next hours at hole number 5 pressing my knees into the carpet and dragging a scraper across the peeling paint on the 2x4s. The carpet was damp, and so my shorts got damp, and they sagged around my waist like diapers. The sun was cooking my forehead into a piece of toast. Scraping wasn't easy, and the sound it made was shocking. When I finally finished, I skipped to the garage to lose the scraper. Mom said next I would get to wipe off the dirt along the boards I had just scraped using an old rag. Get to. Those were her words. People complain a lot about the world, how it isn't fair. Many of these people are children. That's because children have intricate internal measuring devices. They can eyeball an entire tray of birthday cake and instantly detect which piece to avoid. Too small, not enough frosting, drooping onto the top, etc. To a child, justice is palpable, obvious. Another of the senses, like hearing, taste, or smell. If you put a group of children together in a room along with a thing that needs dividing, minutes later, you will discover surprisingly equal portions. Perhaps the reason there are rich countries and poor countries, rich people and poor people, is that the dividing is done by grown-ups. Adults have weird ways of measuring fairness. Children would never allow such inequity to happen. I like doing that part because I like that part about kids because it's so true. I don't know where that came from. You know, sometimes when you're writing, you're working really hard, and sometimes things just, for a brief moment, just come to you, and it's just wonderful when that happens. It's hard to take credit for it. You feel like, I don't know where that came from. But that is so true. Grateful I was the one with the pen in the hand when that happened. Or I was probably typing. I don't know. You know, it seems a little miracle sometimes, these little pieces that just happen. You know, it's so true. Kids are just amazing. I remember supervising the cake frosting. Don't skip the edges. That's my thing. I still do that. I will read some more, but I also just kind of like to break things up with questions. And rather than waiting till the end, I'll see if anybody has any questions right now. And I'll take a question and then read some more. Anyone have a question? Yeah. The question was, did I remember all this, or did I start gathering stories long before I started writing? A little bit of both. You know, I tape recorded a lot. I tape recorded family talking about Tom Thumb and reminiscing. And I think the earliest interviewing I did of my parents for it dates from the mid-90s. And I don't even remember why I did that. I just felt a need to. And I wasn't writing about it back then. I was writing poetry and comedy. I had no intention of writing a book. I don't know why. But I have that. It's really fun. So that helped. The thing with interviewing people is that you get their perspective, but it also reminds you of things yourself. You know, when you write a book, it has to be from your own perspective. I don't want to write things that I didn't experience because that just seems weird to me. That's someone, you know, that's not how it works. But I interviewed people, cousins and aunts and uncles, to give me perspective, one, to help you remember things, and because it was really fun. It's really fun to ask people questions and have them tell you things you weren't aware of. I love it. The other thing that is really kind of wild, how many of you have tried writing about your own life? A memoir or some memories or a family history? Has anybody tried writing? Maybe see if you agree with me. For some reason, the act of writing about your life opens up areas in your brain or in your memory that you had forgotten. If you want to remember something that happened to you when you were 12, start writing about it, write what you remember, and it's amazing how you will actually remember more things you had forgotten by just doing the act of writing. And I've said this to my students. I teach writing frequently, and it tends to be true. And I don't know why, but it's kind of awesome. So I highly recommend it. If there's a time in your life in particular you would like to know more about, experiment with this. And let me know if it works. I would love to know. But generally, it's true. But, you know, in conversation with people, it's helpful, too, when you have... We did a lot of reminiscing together. You know, my family and I would have a tape recorder running. And it's really fun to remind each other of things. Occasionally, I did sort of fictionalize. I don't remember the very first customer who came to Tom Thumb. In the first chapter, how the story kind of revolves around, we're not ready to open the first day. We don't let people play until finally my dad says okay to someone who can be the first customer. It's a woman and her son at 6:30. Do I remember exactly who was the first one? No, I don't. So this is the one area where I took a little creative license. But I'll tell you what I did. I worked really hard to come to this. My dad... If all day long there's hundreds of people coming and asking to play, and we're not ready, you have to take pity on someone at some point and just say, go ahead, we're not ready, but you can play anyway. Who would my dad take pity on? Well, would not have probably been another man. It probably would have been a woman. It probably would have been a woman with a kid. Maybe not a lot of kids, because that would be a little too daunting, because we're still working. We're still trying to get things set up. So it can't be too much, can't be too threatening. And so I thought, you know, most likely it was a mother and a son that would have gotten my dad's empathy to let, you know, yeah, it's time to let someone start. And so I took a long time coming to that conclusion. I really felt responsible if I'm kind of fictionalizing. Like, let me make sure this really seems logical. And I checked with my sisters. These seem logical? Yes. So that's how I did that. You know, when you write nonfiction, you have to sort of have your own sense of what seems right and what's true. Does anyone really care so much who the first customer was? No, but as much as me, probably. But I felt like I had to be, if I'm putting in a book, I really think most likely that's exactly who it was. It definitely wasn't a big family group. Yeah. The question was, why did you major in electrical engineering? That's a funny thing. I don't know. No one knows anything at age 17. You're expected to make these big decisions and you don't know anything. You know, it's so funny. And we still do that. We go to kids, so what are you going to do with your life? And you're like, all I've seen is the television set and the few blocks around here, you know. It was a none of the above category. I was told I can go into any field after that. You could go into medicine. You could go to law school. You could do anything. So I'm like, well, it's a none of the above. I guess I'll just do that for a while. I'll read another thingy and then do questions. I like going back and forth. It's fun. Um, I know. I'm going to read something and then take more questions. I like to mix it up. I want to read this one. So, the thing about a mini golf course, and probably you can picture this having been there, is that it's kind of fragile. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot of things can go wrong. And so it's you feel a little vulnerable having put all your time and energy into a place. And then you don't know what's going to happen to it the next day. So here's this section. It's about a motorcycle gang. I love hearing that grumble. It's really fun. It starts, I'm working in the ticket booth. There's no sound from a lake. It is stillness. You hear the things that are drawn to it. The red-winged blackbirds, outboard motors, the buzz of a fly, or heavy equipment coming around the corner. Not one bulldozer, perhaps a few. Several bulldozers? No, the sound is moving too fast, insistent like a jackhammer inside your head. Racing, roaring, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, about 50 of them, and they're coming our way. The motorcycles pulled up to the split rail fence in front of the ticket booth. Some had handlebars that came up near the riders' ears. It was a gang. Leather vests, leather hats, bandanas made entirely of leather. Tattoos of skulls, some with hearts, some with wings. I tapped the red button on the intercom. Call, call. This made a beep beep in the house. It meant, please come, SOS. The men wore leather chaps, the women leather shorts. One of the women had a terrifying resemblance to my elementary school gym teacher, Miss Vedvik. Beep, beep, please come. They kicked at their bikes until they rose up on metal pedestals. They raked their fingers through their mustaches. The women took off their mirrored sunglasses and pulled at their leather shorts. My dad came trotting down the path, my mother behind at a respectful and possibly terrified distance. He hurried inside the ticket booth. One of the men came to the counter. Can you tell me how to get to Clearwater Harbor? Sure, my dad said. My sisters and I stood in the gap between the ticket booth and snack shack, cowering like schoolgirls in the playground when worms are being thrown after the rain. Where are you folks from? My dad asked. No, don't talk to them. Don't delay their getting out of here. They started chatting with Dad, and you could forget for a moment that they were child killers and dog molesters. They seemed to be only dressed like murderers, but still, you could tell Dad was nervous. These guys could rip out everything with one sweep. His own arms were the size of small pipes. Well, let me show you on a map, we heard him say. No, no, Dad, not a map. We mouthed to each other. My dad, a school teacher, loved to point things out on maps. He could tell you where to find the new box of breakfast cereal if he could draw a map of the kitchen. He came around the front of the ticket booth. Now he was surrounded by them, all wearing leather. So much leather. Where once he, as a farmer, had stood calmly among a herd of Guernsey cows. Maybe everything would be fine except for one thing. My father tended to give directions using the wrong finger. Now, you start here on cue. I'm not going to gesture to you. There might be taping on it. He pointed with his middle finger. Then take that north, about a mile or two to here. He traced the path for them by dragging his middle finger along the road and then pointing to the men who stood around him. The man in the leather head wrap looked at my father's face. Is this guy threatening me? No, you don't want to get off at QQ, my father continued, still tracing with his middle finger. Head wrap looked over at mutton chop mustache, who looked over at graybeard and flying skull tattoo. Is this guy flipping us off? They squinted at each other to signal. Not sure. And my father stood between them in his blue shorts and black knee socks, which were tucked into his white tennis shoes. I think you should be able to find it. He folded the brochure. Go ahead and take this. Okay, that'll help, thanks, said Head Wrap. But first, we cowered behind the ticket booth. We've come for a fierce game of mini-golf. Well, you came to the right place, Dad said. He smiled and handed them putters, pointing out all the advantages and disadvantages of the elite clubs, which usually only went to his favorites. We call this one Fat Sally, he said. And the leather men laughed. They showed the putter to their gym teacher girlfriends. Fat Sally, the women said, laughing, taking off their bandanas and draping them on the bikes. For the next 45 minutes, we were allowed to stare at bikers because they had come to our backyard. And even though we thought they looked really overdressed for the heat and all those chaps and vests, they seemed to be rather happy. Wow, we said to each other. Bikers! I know, and they're having so much fun, we said, marveling at the sight. When they finished, Mom smiled and made them cotton candy. That'll be 75 cents, she said. Thanks, take care now. Then they roared off down the road, screaming from the tops of their mufflers that they had had a good time at Tom Thumb. Aww. Thank you. I'll take another question if anyone has one. Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. I think sometimes I do get too excited and talk too fast, and maybe then it doesn't enhance it so much. You know, we'll see. There's a question over here. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. You know, that means a lot to me because when you're a writer, well, I can only speak for myself, can I? You're hoping to make the reader feel the way you feel. You're kind of taking them on a journey. If you're writing memoir, you're wanting them to have the experience that you had. So you're not just telling a story, but it's almost like showing a movie in a way. And I really am grateful to hear that it worked for you and maybe others too, because I think, you know, I didn't want to just tell funny stories. You know, and I heard along, oh, you should write a book about it. You're more of a mini golf course. You should write a book. But I didn't just want to have funny stories. Ha ha ha. Aren't we weird? You know, I wanted to really. No, I think I really did learn about life there. You know, I think you learn about life. Everybody learns about life in a sort of unusual place or a different place. It's funny, you know. People who grew up on farms, I think you learn about life from a farm. And so I kind of really wanted to deal with some big issues, even though it's a funny setting. Maybe it's a risk to take, I don't know. But it's sort of, why not? That's the reality of it, right? Everybody has their own experience in life. Where did you learn? And, you know, what do you take with you from that? So, thanks for telling me. Is there another question? The question's, how apprehensive was I and my family about the fact that I'm writing a book? Well, you know, I've got a very trusting family. I should have told them I'd write them a big check, but I didn't do that. You know, I'll tell you, see, you know, I'm the artist of the family, even though, yeah, I did study science and math. It was pretty apparent early on I'm kind of the one who does the creative artsy things, and I was into music and wrote music, and I think that people expected, yeah, someone probably should write this, and I guess that person would be you, June. So I think there came with that somehow a strange level of trust. I think if there were a couple of us writing, that would have been interesting, because everybody has their different, you know. And have you ever talked to your siblings about your parents, but you find out, really, that's what you thought of them? You know, you're like, wow, not quite, but close, I guess, you know. So they really trusted me, and I really appreciated that and tried to express that. One thing I did do is I very deliberately did not let them read early drafts. And that's because early drafts are terrible. Every book that's written, not just mine, starts out with a really crappy early draft. And you don't want to show them that. First of all, you want to show your work when it's better so they trust you more. And your ideas change along the way, become richer. I think I became more adept. I took 6 years to write the book. I took a long time because I really wanted to do it right. I think I was just really felt a great sense of responsibility because I was writing it for everybody, you know. I think the next one I'll feel less of that. It'll be more, it won't be take place at Tom Thumb. And I'll probably write faster, feeling less of, not a burden, but you know, I want to do it right because this place meant so much to us, and to people kept coming back as you all know. It's been there since 1959, and so a lot of people have a history of going there, and it's part of their family traditions, not just our families. Am I getting way off topic? So it was really, I'll tell you, the most rewarding thing, the most rewarding part of this whole process was not getting an agent, selling the book, finding out I was on the New York Times bestseller list in the sports category, although that was hilarious. Sports category. I wrote a sports book, which as a nerd is delightful. The most rewarding moments were always letting my family read the chapters and listening to them laugh. And I would sort of hover 6 to 10 feet away, sort of doing this kind of thing. And then if they laughed, I'd come running up. What was that? What did you laugh? What? I just want to know. Oh, goodness, that was the best. I didn't expect how rewarding that would be. So fun. So fun to get that. One time, my mom and my younger sister were reading a couple of the chapters, and I wasn't here. I'd sent them ahead, and I was like, put me on speakerphone so I can listen in the background. Silly. Is there another question? Yeah, Nancy. What's next? I am working, I'm taking a break from a bigger, heavier project. I'm working on some short fiction, some fables and fairy tales. I write a lot of those, just sort of a fun way to warm up. Sometimes, when you're sitting down to write, like I've got a big book project and it seems too daunting, and I'll just open up a blank page and just type a little funny story, a little fairy tale, and so I'm collecting those to put out a book of that, which is really fun. And then I'm working on the next memoir, which will be about my years pursuing stand-up comedy, and that will be called Bombing, because it will also be true. But I'm also in that one, I'm really interested in the idea of success. What is success? In this book I talk about it as well. I was trying to be a success by, the American dream is you go off on your own, independently, with the talents you've been given. Take the big risks. This is the American story in every movie. It's always an individual on their own. And here my parents were working at Tom Thumb without, keeping the prices artificially low because they wanted families to be able to afford it. That was their mission. Not to get as much as they wanted for themselves, but to provide a place for families to play together, to bring them closer together. And they did it. That was exactly what they did. So I came to realize they were the successful ones, So I'm just thinking about the idea of what is success and how do we define it? The American dream sometimes is there's a lot of different American dreams. You create your own vision of heaven. They created their own vision of a heaven in the yard. For picnickers can come camp out there for the day, or canoers pull up. Or is the American dream going off on your own to California to become rich and famous? Which is it? Which is, I'm not sure, I don't like to come up with answers. I like posing the questions. I feel like that's part of my job as a writer. I have no idea what the question was. Is there one more question? Yeah. Yes. It's a good question. When I was a comedian and performer in California, did I use stories about my family in my act? And the answer is no. I was very private. And I didn't, also when you're doing stand-up comedy, if you're talking about your family, what you have to do is make fun of them. What you have to do is imitate your mother in a funny voice, and imitate your father in a funny voice. And you have to exaggerate. And I think part of me I did not want to do that. In a book you can be more nuanced. Yes, I'm saying funny things, but it's complicated. It's 300 pages. The story is much more complex. Everybody's quirky and weird in real life, and everybody has their also passions. I think everybody is genuinely, even everybody has their generous side as well. Life is complicated. So to do stand-up comedy, it's simplifying it. I just didn't want to do that. I did try at one point. I tried to do a one-woman show because they were all the rage in the mid-90s. And that is the kind of thing where you get up on stage by yourself. Instead of a comedy club, it's like at a theater, and you do a longer piece about your family. And I tried telling this story. I think it was called Once Upon a Windmill, which is a terrible title. And it was terrible. Do you want to know why it was terrible? Because they hadn't sold it yet. It was just a funny place in my background, just a set of funny stories. Once they sold it, then I had the story, because then the story is, why does it mean so much to me? Why do I care now? Suddenly, you know. So I think there was always writers in the audience, so I'll say this for those of you who are writing. Sometimes, well, I think it's always good to write about your life. I think it's great for everybody, even if you aren't considering yourself a writer. Go for it. You learn a lot by writing about things. But I think sometimes stories are ripe. You know, it was ripe. It was ready for me to write it, starting when they sold it. Earlier than that, it wasn't quite ready yet. Ripe. That's sort of funny, but I think it's true. Is there another question here? Yeah. Did I ever go to the drive-in movie theater? I did, once or twice. One of your kids keeps a piece of rotten wood as a souvenir from Tom Thumb. I love this so much. Wait a second. I know you go. Wait a second. That is hilarious. Was this before or after you read my book? Just someone just randomly picking? I love this so much. You know, I'm going to put that on the internet all over the place, on Twitter or something. Like someone's keeping a piece of rotted wood as a souvenir. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. The drive-in movie theater. Yeah, missed those too. You know, I don't know why there's such an emphasis these days to embrace the new and embrace the change. And if you admit that you like things from the past, it's sort of poo-pooed. And nostalgia is considered a bad thing. But I kind of feel like it's such a weird thing, because the reason I like thinking about the drive-in movie is that I remember going there with my cousins. We had cousins, and we'd pile in the car once or twice, maybe in all the years we lived here, because we didn't get away all that often. And we put lawn chairs outside of that drive-in movie theater, and we had so much fun. So it's not just so much that I love drive-in movies, and we should have the old technologies, that I love being reminded of the really awesome times that I had. And that, you know, why shouldn't I have a reminder of, like, that was so fun. I would love to remember it again, because it's just like, oh my gosh, the cousins. And then, like, popcorn in, like, probably a garbage-sized bag, you know, because we ate a lot of stinking popcorn. Peg? Yeah, Fort Waupaca. I'll have to ask him about, yeah, Fort Waupaca, because there were stories there, and I actually tape recorded him, a couple cousins who worked there, and I got, you know, stories from there, but I couldn't work as many of them in, you know. I want to do one last thing, or am I going to wrap up? Okay, I'm going to do this. Yeah. You know what? If you need to leave early and buy a book, John right over here can help you out. Go ahead and do that while I talk, because heaven knows. I used to do comedy clubs. People did all kinds of things in the background, buy drinks and stuff. You're like, I'm used to that. Like, you know what I mean? I'm going to end on this. It's just a little thought, what I just sort of mentioned. It's modern and trendy not to pine for the past, but I do anyway. And pretending that I don't would be lying. But perhaps being sentimental isn't being mushy or emotional. Perhaps I am sentimental because I wasn't paying attention the first time things happened. I didn't appreciate floating on inner tubes. I complained about the condition of our bikes rather than enjoying the freedom of picking wild blackberries along Whirl Road. But I am not the only one. This is what it's like to be an adult. To realize the best program in the world was being broadcast just for you on your own private movie screen, and you were looking away. In my case, complaining about the sun, the wind, or the fairness of life. Does sentiment live next door to nostalgia? Are they cousins? Are they the same? Being sentimental, perhaps, is expressing emotions now that you didn't bother to experience the first time around, when you should have taken care of it. Like doing the laundry 30 years too late. I'm finally getting around to enjoying my childhood. And this is why, perhaps, I am wondering if my being sentimental is just another form of greed. I want it all back.
Thank